So good afternoon, everyone. I hope we're all enjoying getting ready for Shabbat. Thought we'd spend just a few minutes on some Torah to get things going. I think this is kind of interesting. Let's jump right into it if I can figure out how to do the screen share. There we go. The text we're going to look at is from the Torah reading for tomorrow. This is a well-known Torah reading. We do this also for Rosh Hashanah, so I think we know most of it. But just to set things up, Sarah saw the son whom Hagar, the Egyptian, had born to Abraham playing. The Hebrew word is mitzachek. And she said, cast out that slave woman and her son. And that son of that slave shall not share in the inheritance with my son Isaac. And the matter distressed Abraham, but he did it anyway. And so the questions that we're led to ask are, well, what does it mean that the son, whose name was Ishmael, that he was playing? What does that mean, and why did that make Sarah so angry that he had to be cast out? And I just highlighted the word that we're going to study, mitzachek, in bright red. The surface level, a good place to always start is to look at Ibn Ezra, and I'm looking at this. The Hebrew's a little bit out of order. It got transposed somehow, but the English is fine, and that's the important part. But he explains this the way I think most of us read it at the surface, mitzachek. Kikein minhag kol na'ar. He was playing because this is the way that all children are. In other words, Ishmael was mocking the young Isaac. And anyone who has kids know that this is going to be the order of the day. This is not going to be unusual. And Sarah was jealous because he, Ishmael, was greater than her son. And again, the natural maternal instinct that we see. And even though in this reading Sarah does not look that fantastic, but we understand where she's coming from. We identify with the desire that our children are going to have everything that they need, and when other children are we see other children as a barrier, we can sometimes be difficult. So this is kind of the surface meaning of the text. However, to look at this deeper, we have to introduce a compilation album by Johnny Cash. I don't remember if this one was done when he was still alive, but the people who put this album together recognized that there were three main genres that Johnny Cash worked in his music. There was love, and there was God, and there was murder. There was shooting the man in Reno just to watch him die. And so when we turn to how the rabbis read this verse, we're going to have to invoke these three categories. The three cardinal sins of rabbinic Judaism come down to this triad of love, God, and murder. Have Galui Ayarot, which are sexual sins, Avodah Zarah, which is adultery having to do with God, and of course murder, Shfichut Damim. And so in this midrash, and the first place that we see this is in the collection called Bereshit Rabbah, the Genesis Rabbah, which is a collection of midrashim, probably the 5th or 6th century, where we always say things are from if we don't really know. But so the rabbis, there's a dispute on how to read the word mitzachek. None of them read it the way that Ibn Ezra read it, or the way that we might want to read it. And so Rabbi Akiva says that the meaning of mitzachek is Galui ayarot, that's sexual sin. that Sarah saw Ishmael committing a grave sexual sin. That's corresponding to love in our triad of love, God, and murder. Rabbi Ishmael said that Sarah saw Ishmael engaged in an act of avodat chochavim, avodah zara, that he was engaged in idolatry. And Rabbi Eliezer ben Rabbi Yossi Hagilali says that the way to read mitzachek is shefichut damim. That's to say, murder, the third category. And so the question arises: what are the rabbis thinking? Have they gone crazy, perhaps? The first answer is to, well, of course, we're not going to say that the rabbis have gone crazy. We're going to try to understand why they come to the stunning reading of the text. The first possibility, of course, before we do the proof text, is that the rabbis are inspired to try to justify or try to explain the position of Sarah. That when we read the pasuk sort of simply, Sarah doesn't look so good. If Ishmael is doing something terrible, then Sarah looks a lot better. So there is that motivation. But there's also the linguistic connection that the rabbis are going to make with this word mitzachek, which is it's not completely, I wouldn't call it totally unusual, but it's a strange word, and so they're going to connect it to other parts of the Torah. And for instance, if you take the position of Rabbi Akiva, that mitzachek refers to sexual sin, we have the proof text from the story of Potiphar's wife. When the husband comes home and the wife says falsely that Joseph tried to seduce her, she says, "Ba alai ha'eved ha'ivri asher heveta lanu litzachek bi," to seduce me. And so the root there is used with the idea of sexual impropriety, and that's evidence for the position of Rabbi Akiva. If we wanted to justify the position of Rabbi Ishmael and say what we're talking about is idolatry, then we have the position then we have the story of the golden calf, where we read Vayeshev ha'am le'echol v'shato vayakumu litzachek. Again, the root of the word, but the idea that the people sat down to eat and to drink, and then they started to make merry in an idolatrous fashion. And if we wanted to look at the third position of Rabbi Shimon, we have the story from the beginning of the second book of Samuel, the Battle of Gibeon, where it says, "Yakumu na hane'arim ve'yishkachu lefanenu." Let the boys rise before us and do battle with each other. Let them try to kill each other. And so we have the same word spelt a little differently here, used with the category of bloodshed or of murder. Before we go on to the next little piece, I want to understand if I can stop sharing for a second. I think I did. I think I'm stopped. We'll see when we watch this whether I worked it out or not. But we could look at this and we could say, well, this is just silliness that the rabbis are engaged in. But there's another possibility, and that's that the rabbis want to be taken seriously here. And one person who always took the Aggadot very seriously was the Maharal of Prague, the great Jewish thinker of the 16th century. And when he reads this Haggadah, when he writes on this Haggadah in his commentary on Rashi, he says that it's kind of a false choice here to talk between murder, to talk between sexual sin, to talk between what was the third one? I have my Rick Perry moment. Idolatry. Idolatry. He says that all of these things are manifestations of the same property, which is captured in the word litzachek. That to be litzachek is to deny reality. If you are murdering somebody, you're denying the reality of that person. If you are engaging in sexual sin, you're engaging in denial of the reality of why our bodies were created by God. And of course, if you're in idolatry, it's perhaps the greatest denial of reality at all. So he reads this verse as like so many things in the book of Genesis, as a typology. That one of the things that set the children of Israel apart, even before there was Israel, when we're talking about the children of Abraham, but one of the things that sets the line of Isaac apart from the line of Ishmael is the question of seriousness. That the line of Ishmael was not serious, that they denied reality, and that it's the property of the children of Israel that we're engaged in mitzvah, we're engaged in this reality. This is not going to probably be a sermon that you're going to hear this week in synagogue, but this is not an uncommon way of reading the scripture. I'm going to go back to the screen share because I want to close with a really mind-blowing analysis of this verse in line of what we've read. And this is from the commentary of Rabbi Eliyahu ben Amozig, the Jewish Plato. And, in other lectures and other classes, I've gone into great depth about who he is. I'm not going to now, but I just want to share this very interesting comment of his and how it ties into what we have done before. So the verse is Asher Yoldu LaAvraham Mitzachek, the child that was born to Abraham playing. There's that word. The first thing that Ben Amozig does is he cites the midrash that we were all looking at. I mean, particularly the third opinion, the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Rabbi Yossi Hagigalvi, that mitzachek actually refers to shifchut damim, that it refers to murder, refers to bloodshed. And he starts with the observation, and this is showing the tremendous learning that Ben Amozig had in all literatures, both the Jewish and classical, that he says that in every language, the word to play or to have a game has the sinister aspect of also to shed blood or to kill. And his example is from Latin, ludo, which he says has this property. Now, I'm going to admit right away, my Latin's not at the level that I can evaluate that. But you think even in English, how the word game simultaneously means something that we're playing the game of life on a board, we're playing sorry, we're playing chess, but we also refer to game as hunting something, to game. We're going to trap some game, we're going to kill some game. So there does seem to be this connection between game and the shedding of blood, at least in English. But to magnify his point, he quotes Saint Paul. As we've seen in other classes, quoting the New Testament is something that Ben Amozig does relentlessly in his commentary on the Torah. And that's one of the reasons that his book was placed in Cherem in Aleppo. But he always seems to do it for an interesting reason. And he cites Paul in his letter to the Galatians. He cites him in Latin here. But the point that Paul is making is that Ishmael was the carnal son. He was the son of flesh. And that Isaac was the spiritual son. He was the son of wisdom, and that the son of wisdom in this case comes to displace the son of the flesh, even though that son is the second son, even though Ishmael is older. This is a story of how the son who's attached with the material not in touch with the material, someone who's in touch with the spiritual realm, with the mitziyut, with the reality, the ultimate reality, comes to displace the son who has the appetites for love, for idolatry, and for murder. And why does Ben Mosig cite this? He cites this because you could make the argument that Bereshit Rabbah, that the Midrash, well, that's very late, and that the rabbis are reading something into the text that is not necessarily there. That's an innovation. That's a typology. Ben Mosig cites Paul because Paul lived probably 500 years before. 500 years before before our earliest edition, or our earliest witness of Bereshit Rabbah, and it's to show by means of studying the Christian scripture that we can count on the rabbinic text as an authentic witness, as a reliable witness to this typological reading of the story of Isaac and Ishmael. Finally, just to close on a point that hopefully ties some of this together and whets one's appetite to think more about this very interesting issue. This is from John Levinson's book, The Death and Resurrection of the Beloved Son, in which Levinson examines in depth the various the origins and the meanings of the story of the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, which is in fact in this week's Parsha as well. And it arises because of the reading of the rabbis of the story of Ishmael, and Paul's interpretation of it as well, raises the question of supersessionism. This idea that one covenant, that one people displace another people. As Jews, we usually think of this as a bad thing. When we have interfaith dialogues and stuff, we're always shaking our finger at the other clergy and saying, "Try not to be so supersessionist." If you could do it for even a few hours, that would be fantastic. But the irony is that supersessionism is something that Christians probably learned from Jews and from Jewish readings of the Hebrew scriptures. And Levinson says here, writing on the Akedah, the bond between Jewry and the church that the beloved son constitutes is, however, enormously problematic. For the long-standing claim of the church that it supersedes the Jews in large measure continues the old narrative pattern in which a late-born son dislodges the firstborn brothers, as we see in this example with Isaac displacing Ishmael, with varying degrees of success. Nowhere does Christianity betray its indebtedness to Judaism more than in its supersessionism. So it's a case of midah keneged midah, measure for measure. In other words, they learned it from us. They learned it from things that we read about in this morning's Parashat. And with that, I hope you found that as interesting as I did, or maybe partially as interesting as I did. And I hope that everyone has a great Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom.